Last Sunday, I did a precursor to this sermon by sharing a little bit about Paul's missionary journeys. Did anybody remember that? I put up these 3 missionary journeys. If you didn't get to see it, they're all online. Go back, watch it. I thought it was a decent sermon. But I sort of put up these 3 missionary journeys of Paul and said that they were all different in their approach. The first missionary journey was very well planned, where Paul and Barnabas followed it through step by step. The second missionary journey was also very well planned, but when they were trying to follow it through step by step, they had to do a lot of adapting because things kept changing and the Holy Spirit kept on prompting them to do other things. And by the time they get to the third missionary journey, it's a little bit like we have a direction we're going to go, but even in Paul's words, he says, I'm not sure what's going to happen, and I don't know what we're going to do even when we get there. And so it's this idea we're setting a direction, but who knows? And I asked the evening service, because we did a bit more of a conversational approach last Sunday night, I asked them, where do you think we are as a church? What sort of approach should I do in my Vision Sunday talk? You know, should it be, here are the plans and we're going to follow them through step by step, or here are the plans but let's be open to adaptation, or here's a direction and we have no idea where we're going to end up anyway? I'd love to hear your responses to that. Who wants to hold up fingers? Who thinks we're on a number 1 journey at the moment? The second missionary journey? The third missionary journey? Yeah, that's about what happened at Night Church as well. Somewhere between 2 and 3, more leaning towards 2. And I would possibly agree with that. I think plans are good. Plans are good. But at the moment, we need to be open to adaptations. And so, in a little bit, when we come to something like Vision Sunday, which does set some directions and does set some plans in place, we do that with the understanding that we're always listening to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, and we're not sure what this year is going to bring to us, but we are ready to embrace whatever comes and adapt if needed. Also last week, in the beginning of this week, I showed a video that had that great line that I said already in this service, that we're refusing to let last year determine how we approach this year. It would be very easy for us to go, last year was hard, last year caused some other complications, and therefore, you know, this year's not going to be any different. No, we are making the decision. We're not going to let 2020 define our 2021. God is not finished with us yet as a community or as individuals, and we are moving forward with God. Which brings us to Vision Sunday, where, through some conversations with Church Council and other people, we just wanted to share some of the thoughts that we have on the direction that God is leading us this year. Now, I didn't have one up the front here, but did you get a little brochure on the way in? Because if you didn't, they're sitting up the back on the back table. You can grab one, because they have a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about that you can actually have in your hand. And so feel free to jump up, move around, grab one if you want. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention in my announcements, it's communion today. So particularly if you're watching this online, you might need to organise some elements before we get to communion. And if you're in the building and have forgotten, we do have elements up the back as well. That's what made me think of that. All right, so a bit over 3 years ago, just before I arrived, can you believe that I clicked over 3 years in December? It doesn't feel like it, does it? Wow. Just before that, Church Council at the time put together a really interesting framework for mission. This is what it looked like, the core priority of faith and discipleship. Then it had 3 other priorities that sat underneath that, of children, youth, families. We added young adults over the past 3 years, generations, which we adapted slightly to pastoral care and seniors, and community engagement. At our Church Council retreat we had about October last year, we were asked, is that vision, is that framework still valid? Is that still where God is calling us? And Church Council, after some prayerful discernment, came back with the answer, yes. almost that we saw this as part of our DNA that is ingrained into us at the moment, that this is where God is calling us in a church. And we saw no need to radically change those 4 vision priorities. We were also asked as a church council at that same meeting, well, therefore, what is our priorities for this year then? For 2021, actually we're doing it from October last year onwards. What are the priorities then? What do we invest extra energy into? Just like Paul might say, all towns are important, but I'm going to spend 3 weeks in this one and 2 years at this one. Where do we as a church invest extra time and energy and focus? And Church Council came back with 2 points. They came back with young adults, that we really felt like we needed to invest deeply in our young adults at the moment. We wanted to grow young by journeying with, encouraging, resourcing and empowering the young adults in our church. And the other one that we came up with was being a good neighbour, embracing what it means to be a lighthouse church and a just church, and reaching out beyond ourselves, whether that's to our local community, to the churches around us. Both of those came a little bit from a book the Church Council are working through at the moment called Growing Young. If you want a good book to read at the moment, I would suggest that's a really interesting book about how as a church, the idea is many churches are growing old at the moment. We as a church have a desire to grow young. And so in the light of those things that the Church Council put forward, I would like to just refresh the vision priorities that we set 3 years ago, not changing them in any ways, but just really refresh the wording. And so these are the wordings that I'd like to put forward, that our core mission priority is still faith and discipleship. That's what we're about. We're a Jesus-centric church that want people to know Jesus and to grow in Jesus. That's what we're all about. But sitting underneath that, the refreshed mission priorities was growing young with young adults, children, youth and families, being a good neighbour, reaching out to the local community, to other churches and to justice issues and to caring and connecting / pastoral care. They're still the same. I've just changed the wording. And so, I think those clearly set out the direction that God is giving us as a church. And as I said, nothing's really changed from 3 years ago. We still felt this was strong and valid, and we believe that this is where God is leading us forward. However, I do need to add some things at this point. Partly, I was listening to Joe Biden's inaugural address when he became president, and one of the interesting things he did is that he acknowledged the challenges that was before him. And I went, wow, we're facing some challenges as a church as well. And I think it's important for us to actually be real about this and to acknowledge the challenges that are before us. Not that so we can feel overwhelmed by these challenges, but if we are real about them and acknowledge them, we can address them and move forward. In our Bible reading today from Romans 12, I told you I'm going to refer to it a few times. In verse 9, Paul says that our love must be sincere. Sincere. In the Latin, sincere comes from 2 Latin words, literally sin and seer, and they mean no wax. No wax. What are we talking about here? Well, back in the times when people were making lots of pottery, some potters would try and trick their customers. And if a pot got cracked during the kiln process, is that how you say it? Yes? What they'd do is that they'd put wax in the crack and paint over it and pretend that everything was okay until you put something hot in a pot and then the wax melts and the crack is emerged and you're shown to be a fraud. And so when Paul is saying your love must be sincere, he's saying your love must, not just cover up the cracks. It needs to address the issue which is there. And I think that's the same in the life of the church. We just need to acknowledge that we've got some challenges before us at the moment. Not try and pretend everything is perfect, but let's acknowledge that there are some challenges and address them and move forward. For example, as we move into 2021, we need to address that we have actually some ministry staff shortage at the moment and changes in the way that our volunteers are volunteering. We've known for the past 2 years as our church has grown that our ministry staff and volunteers have been stretched, and that some of our momentum may be being stifled because of that moving forward. So we embarked on our big audacious goal of employing some new ministry staff. We got to this point last year that we were just about to press our go button on employing more ministry staff, and then COVID hit, and now 12 months later, not only have we still not finalised that because it's been difficult during COVID, but also John, you finished up at the end of last year, so we're actually in an even worse position in terms of ministry shortage at the moment. We were also discovering that COVID has changed the way that people are volunteering, that many of our groups of volunteers, because we haven't done it for 9 months, are out of the habit of volunteering. And we're just starting to find that our volunteering coming back into things, the pool size is much smaller than what it was. I say that not to make people feel guilty. I know there's lots of reasons for that. I'm just acknowledging a challenge which is before us. A challenge that we almost need to address moving forward, otherwise our momentum will continue to be stifled moving forward. Another challenge that we need to be real about is that while we strongly affirm this desire to grow young, to be a church full of children, youth, young adults and families, as a church we find ourselves at the end of a natural cycle that we've been through, where for the past, 15, 20, 25 years, we've had an amazing group of families which all had children that filled this church with kids. And that cycle is coming to an end, and we need to be asking the question, well, where's the next generation of children, youth and families coming from? And, the next wave, where is that coming from? Now, once again, that's not a hard thing to be addressing, but it needs to be addressed because it doesn't just naturally happen. We just can't assume, they'll just be here. No, we need to be working proactively for that. It can happen. I believe it can happen. It's just a challenge that we need to address. The other big challenge I see is this idea of reconnection, which I mentioned that word before as being my word for the year. But I don't think it's the right word. I'll mention that later. As a church, I am in awe of the way that our church coped with the pandemic. It was extraordinary what we were able to do as a community, continuing 3 services a week, all different, 2 of them live and interactive. Extraordinary, but also the way that people have been making sure that we've been connecting with each other as we've moved through that as well. I've also discovered that during COVID, a lot of people have found new ways of connecting into the church community. The 40-odd people watching online at the moment is a good example of that. That people are connecting in different ways. And some people are finding these new ways of connecting helpful. There's some people saying, I love this online stuff, it's been so helpful for me in my situation. Other people are finding new ways of connecting hard and feeling a sense of disconnection because of what's happened. And so I think that we need to be working on strengthening connections this year. That's the challenge before us. How do we strengthen those connections that we have? But I think if I keep using the word reconnection, we get caught. Because reconnection sort of hints that we're connecting people back in the same way as they were connected before. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think that we're going to be finding different ways or modified ways or new ways of connecting people into the life of the church. And so me being me, I've made up a word. I've come up with a word called neo-connection. Neo being the Greek word for modified or new or different. No, it's not a word. I tried to check it up. Some people have used it before, but it's not officially a word. Neo-connection. But I actually think it's a better word to say we need to strengthen neo-connections. We need to be looking at the new ways that people are connecting, whether that's the people who are online or the people who are geographically not even near us, or the people who are connecting in almost anonymously because they can now. How do we strengthen those connections as we move forward. As I said, I share these challenges with you not to make you feel overwhelmed and go, oh, this is all too hard, but to rather say, this is being real. We don't want to just cover up the crack and pretend it's not there. No, this is real. This is what we're facing as a community, but together we can address these and move forward. As a pastor, I also wanted to add a few of my own thoughts here. A lot of these have come from discussions with church council and other people. These next 3 words I'm going to offer you come from me and some of my own ponderings. But I want to be clear, if you're talking about my own thoughts, I sit very clearly underneath those mission priorities. Everything I do, I am driven by those mission priorities. And so I'm not a person who's going off on a tangent by myself. I'm sitting within the church's vision. But at the same time, I want to offer you 3 words that might help shape that vision as we move forward into 2021. This is particularly relevant for that first core mission priority, faith and discipleship, but these 3 words do actually work for the other 3 mission priorities as well. And the 3 words I want to suggest, the first one is considered. You see, our faith in Jesus is not one where, as a church community, we're just told what to believe and we believe it. We're not a church like that. We are a church who likes to actively work out their own theology. Theology is just God talk. Work out the way that we understand God and work out the way that we speak about God. Or as Paul said in our Bible reading, he said we are a church that actively is involved in the transforming of our minds. We are interested in that. Being an inclusive church, we recognise the breadth of the different thoughts and ideas that belong even within this congregation, but certainly across the life of our church. We encourage that transforming renewal of the mind through conversations and exploration. We actually enjoy talking to people who don't think like us because it helps us think to expand our thinking. We draw upon important sources such as the Bible and theologians and church teaching and our own intellect and reason to help develop that considered faith response. We believe that wrestling with issues of faith together, that the truth of God is revealed. And as such, I'm going to continue to encourage that, especially this year, that we need to be encouraging conversation and listening and inquisitive questions and mutual respect and an openness to hearing God speak through the Bible and through each other. I think considered is a good word for us this year. The next word I want to put up there is growing. The New South Wales Synod of the Uniting Church has put forward growing as one of their key priorities, and we want to be embracing that as a church as well, to be growing, to be a growing church. We wish to spiritually grow in our personal relationship with Jesus, communally grow together in our care and support of our church family, practically grow as our lighthouse church as we're reaching out beyond us to those around us, and numerically grow as the number of people connected and transformed and influenced by this church. Part of this growth is for us to personally be considering how we are empowered to participate in God's mission to grow and serve as well. And the last word I want to put forward is just. I know I've been circling around this word for 3 years now, but it keeps coming back to me. It's almost like, we need to embrace that as a church. We are committed to walking the way of Jesus, who did have a bias to reaching out to those who were poor and marginalised and those who were suffering injustice. Half of Paul's encouragement in Romans chapter 12, the Bible reading that we read out, is all about things that are not about ourselves, but how we help others. Read it again. You'll see how many of those encouragements are about reaching out beyond ourselves. If we wish to be a church that helps the members, not only members of this community, but members of our local community and beyond, to be aware of social justice issues, to encourage and empower people to respond in a way which is right for them and a way that makes a difference. I always feel that I speak too much in Vision Sunday talks. Is that true? I get excited and I just feel like I talk and I talk and I talk. Anyway, I'm almost at the end. I do want to just acknowledge that I can't actually fit everything in this Sunday, so I've actually bumped some of it to next week. Because if you're sitting there going, yeah, but what's the concrete steps? What are we doing here? You know, give me the plan. Yeah, that's next Sunday. Come back. And I will give you some of the concrete stuff next week. I'm more setting the bigger picture, the direction this week. But if you do come back next Sunday, whether that's online or in person, no way you're going to read that on the screen. It's in your little flyer. I just cut and paste that directly out of that. But I am going to be talking about how we can encourage relational communities and strengthen connections with each other and to God, and in doing so, strengthen our discipleship process. I am going to be talking about how we can actively be a church that grows young. And that includes developing and implementing strategies that engage and retain teenagers and young adults and develop sticky faith within them, the faith that's going to last through their whole lives. And I am going to be talking about how we can raise awareness and create opportunities to people to respond to God's love by being a good neighbour to the people around us, the communities around us, the churches around us, and beyond us into other issues, such as issues of justice. That's what it means to be a lighthouse church. So that's what I'm going to be touching on next week. I'm just giving you the headlines. It will be good. Connect back in next week. But I want to go back just to finish on those 3 words again that kept coming back to me in all my reflecting. You see, as we move into 2021, I'm going to be using these 3 words to remind us of our own calling as a church and as individuals, and use these 3 words to help us engage and move forward with the vision. It is my prayer that at the end of 2021, we might find that we all have a more considered faith, that we will all have a growing faith, and that we'll all have a more just faith. It's not a bad thing to aim for, is it?